Beloved child of God. What if the loneliness you've been carrying wasn't proof that God abandoned you? What if every unanswered text, every friendship that quietly faded, every relationship that ended without closure, every invitation you never received, every season where it felt like the world kept moving while your life stood still, was never meant to destroy you, but to prepare you? Perhaps you've asked yourself questions that no one else knows about. Did I do something wrong? Why does everyone seem to be moving forward while I feel left behind? Why have the people I loved become strangers? Why does my life feel so quiet? There are nights when the silence feels louder than any crowd. There are mornings when you wake up wondering if anyone truly understands what you're carrying. You scroll through social media and watch everyone celebrating friendships, marriages, promotions, vacations, and milestones. Meanwhile, you're learning how to eat alone. You're learning how to spend weekends alone. You're learning what it feels like when your phone barely rings. You begin to wonder whether isolation is a punishment, whether God is correcting you, whether you've somehow missed His purpose for your life. But beloved child of God, what if everything you've believed about this season is wrong? Because throughout Scripture, there is a pattern that most people never notice. Before God entrusted someone with influence, He often entrusted them with solitude. Before He revealed purpose, He removed distractions. Before He introduced destiny, He introduced separation. It happened more times than most people realize, and perhaps it's happening to you. This season that feels empty may actually be the fullest season your soul has ever entered, because heaven often becomes the loudest when the world grows quiet. There are lessons God can only whisper that crowds will never allow you to hear. There are parts of your identity that can only emerge after the noise has disappeared. There are blessings that require a version of you that could never have been formed while everyone still had constant access to your heart. So if you've been losing friends, if you're embracing an unexpected season of singlehood, if your life feels like it's been reset, don't click away. Because by the end of this message, you may realize that what looked like rejection was actually divine protection. What felt like abandonment was sacred preparation. And what looked like the end may actually be the quiet beginning of everything God promised. Because before you understand where God is taking you, you first have to understand why He allowed everyone else to leave. And that is where your journey truly begins. Chapter 1. God often removes the noise before He reveals your true identity. Beloved child of God. One of the greatest misunderstandings about isolation is believing it begins with loss. It doesn't. Isolation begins with invitation. Not an invitation from people, an invitation from God, an invitation to discover the version of yourself that has been buried underneath years of expectations, opinions, approval-seeking, and emotional dependency. For most of your life, you've been surrounded by voices telling you who you should become. Family had expectations, friends had expectations, even your own fears created expectations. Without realizing it, many people spend years building a life around acceptance rather than assignment. They become experts at fitting in while quietly forgetting who they truly are. Psychologists often describe this as developing an identity around external validation. When our worth depends on the approval of others, every compliment feels like oxygen, and every rejection feels like suffocation. Over time, we stop asking, "Who has God created me to be?" and start asking, "Who do I need to become so people won't leave me?" But God never designed your identity to be held together by other people's opinions. He designed it to be rooted in Him. Sometimes, the only way to free you from the opinions that shaped you is to temporarily remove the people whose voices became louder than His. That can feel painful, not because God is cruel, but because healing often begins where comfort ends. Think about a sculptor. Before a masterpiece appears, pieces of stone must be chipped away. From the outside, it looks like destruction. But the sculptor isn't destroying the stone. He's revealing what was hidden inside all along. Beloved child of God. Could it be that God isn't taking your life apart? Could He be uncovering the person He always intended you to become? This season may feel empty because the distractions you've depended on are gone. The constant conversations, the endless notifications, the busy schedule, the need to always be surrounded by people. Suddenly, you're left alone with your own thoughts. At first, that's uncomfortable, because silence has a way of exposing everything we've been trying to avoid. The wounds, the disappointments, the insecurities, the fears we buried beneath constant activity. But silence is not your enemy. Silence is where healing begins. Because what you refuse to face, you cannot transform. Perhaps this is why your current season feels different. You're no longer satisfied with shallow conversations. You no longer feel comfortable pretending. Some friendships that once felt exciting now feel exhausting. Some environments that once energized you now leave your spirit feeling drained. This doesn't mean you're becoming arrogant. It may mean you're becoming aware. Growth changes your appetite. Just as a child eventually outgrows certain clothes, a growing soul eventually outgrows certain relationships, habits, and environments. What once fit you comfortably may now feel painfully small, not because those things are evil, but because you've become someone who needs more room to grow. That can be lonely, because growth often happens before new connections arrive. There's a space between what you've outgrown and what God is bringing next. Most people call that space isolation. God calls it preparation. During this season, you'll discover something remarkable. Your peace becomes more valuable than popularity. Your purpose becomes more important than pleasing everyone. Your relationship with God becomes deeper than your need for constant human reassurance. Slowly, the fear of being alone begins to disappear. Not because more people suddenly arrive, but because you discover someone who never left. You begin talking with God in ways you never did before. Prayer becomes less like a ritual and more like a conversation. The scriptures begin speaking directly into situations you thought no one understood. You stop searching for identity and applause because you found it in God's presence. And once that happens, everything changes. Because a person who knows who they are cannot easily be manipulated by rejection. They cannot easily be controlled by loneliness. They cannot easily be distracted by temporary acceptance. Instead, they begin walking with quiet confidence, not because life has become easier, but because their foundation has become stronger. Beloved child of God, maybe your greatest breakthrough isn't waiting for another relationship. Maybe it isn't waiting for old friends to come back. Maybe it isn't waiting for life to return to the way it used to be. Maybe your greatest breakthrough is becoming the person God knew you were before the world told you who to be. And once your identity is no longer chained to who stays or who leaves, you'll be ready to understand a deeper mystery. Because not everyone who walked away from your life was lost by accident. Some departures were orchestrated by heaven itself. And once you understand why, your entire perspective on this season will begin to change. And this leads us to the next chapter. Chapter 2. Some doors had to close so your destiny could open. Beloved child of God. There is a painful truth that many people spend years resisting. Not every goodbye is a tragedy. Some goodbyes are divine appointments. When someone walks away from your life, your first instinct is often to blame yourself. You replay conversations. You wonder what you could have said differently. You question whether you loved enough, cared enough, or simply weren't enough. The human heart craves explanation. We want every ending to come with a reason, every loss to make immediate sense. Yet life rarely offers that kind of closure. Sometimes the only answer we receive is silence, and silence can feel unbearable. But beloved child of God, what if heaven's silence is not empty? What if God is doing His deepest work in the moments when He explains the least? We often pray for God's will, but we imagine His will arriving with open doors, smiling faces, and easy paths. Rarely do we imagine that His answer to our prayer might begin with someone leaving. Yet throughout Scripture, separation often came before promotion, before new purpose, there was often unexpected loss. God has never been afraid to remove what no longer fits the future He has prepared. Think about a gardener tending a healthy vine. To someone unfamiliar with gardening, pruning looks harsh. Healthy branches are cut away, leaves fall to the ground, the vine appears smaller than before. If the vine could speak, it might wonder, why am I losing parts of myself? But the gardener sees what the vine cannot. He knows that unchecked growth produces less fruit. Pruning is not punishment, it is preparation for greater abundance. Beloved child of God, could your life be in a season of divine pruning? Could the friendships that faded have been branches that had already stopped producing life? Could the opportunities that disappeared have been distractions disguised as blessings? It is difficult to admit, but not everyone who celebrates your beginning can accompany your becoming. Some people only know the version of you that sought approval. Some only recognize the version of you that stayed quiet to keep the peace. Some only feel comfortable with the version of you that carried everyone else's burdens while neglecting your own soul. The moment God begins transforming you, those relationships often become uncomfortable, not because you've become difficult, but because you've become different. Growth changes the way you speak. Growth changes the way you spend your time. Growth changes the things you tolerate. The conversations that once entertained you no longer satisfy your spirit. The habits that once felt normal now leave you feeling empty. You begin choosing peace over drama, wisdom over popularity, purpose over performance. And not everyone understands that transformation. Some people mistake your healing for distance. Others mistake your boundaries for rejection. Some even become offended simply because you no longer live to meet their expectations. That can hurt deeply. Because these are often people you genuinely loved. You never wanted to lose them. You simply couldn't lose yourself anymore. Beloved child of God, there comes a moment when choosing God's direction means disappointing people who preferred the old version of you. That choice is never easy, but it is often necessary. The truth is, God is more concerned with your calling than your comfort. He loves you too much to allow relationships that slowly pull you away from the person He created you to become. Some relationships don't end because someone is evil. They end because the season has changed. Just as autumn releases its leaves without anger, God sometimes teaches us to release people without bitterness. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to resent them. You simply bless them and continue walking. Because carrying expired relationships into a new season is like carrying winter clothing into the middle of summer. Eventually, the weight becomes unnecessary. Perhaps you've been praying for restoration while God has been preparing replacement. Not replacement in the sense that people are disposable, but replacement in the sense that every season requires different companions. The people who helped you survive one chapter may not be the people assigned to help you fulfill the next. That realization is painful, yet it is also freeing, because it means your future is not dependent on those who walked away. It is dependent on the God who remained. Beloved child of God, notice something beautiful. Even when people leave, God's purpose never leaves. Even when friendships fade, His promises remain. Even when your circle becomes smaller, His presence becomes greater. He has never measured your future by the number of people surrounding you. He measures it by the condition of your heart. A heart that has learned to trust Him through loss becomes impossible for circumstances to shake. That kind of faith cannot be manufactured in comfort. It is forged in seasons exactly like this one. One day, you'll look back and realize that what felt like abandonment was actually alignment. The wrong voices became quiet so the right voice could finally be heard. The wrong doors closed so the right ones could open. The wrong paths ended so your true journey could begin. But there is still a question that lingers in your heart. If God removed so many people, why does the loneliness still hurt so much? Why does healing sometimes feel slower than you expected? Why do some nights still feel heavy even when you know God is with you? The answer lies in a hidden work that God performs in every season of isolation, a work that cannot be rushed, imitated, or skipped. Because before God fills your life with new relationships, new opportunities, and new purpose. He first teaches your heart how to become whole when it is standing completely alone, and that is the revelation waiting for you in the next chapter. Chapter 3. God is using this season to make your heart whole. Beloved child of God. There is a difference between being alone and being empty. Many people spend years surrounded by family, friends, co-workers, and constant conversation, yet they still feel an ache deep within their soul that no amount of company can satisfy. Others walk through seasons where they have very few people around them, yet they carry a peace that cannot be explained. The difference is not found in the number of relationships. It is found in the condition of the heart. Perhaps one of the greatest gifts hidden inside your isolation is this. God is teaching you that your completeness has never depended on another person. For so long, the world has taught us that happiness begins when someone finally arrives. When you find the right relationship, when you make more friends, when people finally appreciate you, then you'll feel complete. But beloved child of God, if your peace depends entirely on someone else's presence, then your joy will always be vulnerable to someone else's absence. God never intended another human being to carry the weight of becoming your source of identity, security, or fulfillment. People are gifts, but they were never meant to replace God. This is why seasons of solitude often feel uncomfortable at first. They expose the places where we've unknowingly built our emotional foundation upon people instead of God's unchanging love. Psychologists call this emotional dependency, a pattern where our sense of worth rises and falls with how others respond to us. When people approve of us, we feel valuable. When they reject us, we question our identity. Left unchecked, this cycle quietly robs us of peace because it places our emotional stability in hands that were never meant to hold it. God, in His mercy, interrupts that cycle, not to leave you empty, but to fill you with something far more secure. Think of a tree planted beside a river. During the rainy season, almost every tree appears healthy. Water is everywhere. Growth seems effortless. But when drought arrives, something remarkable happens. Only the trees with deep roots continue to stand strong. The drought doesn't create the roots, it reveals them. Beloved child of God, your season of isolation is revealing where your roots truly are. When applause disappears, when messages become fewer, when invitations stop coming, when no one seems to notice your progress, what remains? Does your peace disappear? Or does your confidence remain anchored in the one who never changes? These are difficult questions, yet they are sacred questions, because God is not merely preparing you for your next blessing, He is preparing your heart to sustain it. Imagine receiving every prayer you've ever asked for while still carrying the same insecurities, the same fear of rejection, the same need for constant validation. Would you truly enjoy the blessing? Or would you spend your days anxiously trying not to lose it? God is too loving to give you a future that your present heart cannot yet carry. So before He increases your influence, He strengthens your character. Before He expands your relationships, He deepens your identity. Before He entrusts you with greater responsibility, He teaches you how to remain secure even when no one is watching. This is why your hidden season matters so much, because who you become in private will determine how you stand in public. The victories no one applauds are often the victories heaven celebrates the most. Every morning you choose hope instead of despair. Heaven sees it. Every evening you choose forgiveness over bitterness. Heaven sees it. Every prayer whispered through tears. Every act of faith when your emotions tell you to quit. Every quiet decision to trust God despite not understanding His timing. None of it is wasted. In fact, these unseen moments are shaping a strength that success alone could never produce. Beloved child of God, notice how different you are becoming. You no longer chase every opportunity to be accepted. You no longer panic when someone misunderstands you. You no longer measure your value by how many people include you. Instead, you are discovering something far more precious. You're becoming comfortable in God's presence. The silence that once frightened you is slowly becoming a sanctuary. Instead of fearing the quiet, you begin welcoming it. because it is in the quiet that your heart finally slows down enough to hear God's gentle voice. Not a voice of condemnation, not a voice reminding you of your failures, but a voice that has been speaking over you since before you were born. You are mine. I have not forgotten you. I am still writing your story. Your value has never depended on who stayed or who left. Your future is still secure in my hands. These truths do not remove every painful emotion overnight. Healing is rarely instant. Just as a broken bone needs time to become stronger than before, a wounded heart also requires time, grace, and patience. God is not rushing your healing, because rushed healing often becomes hidden pain. Instead, He is healing you completely, piece by piece, prayer by prayer, day by day, until one morning you wake up and realize the loneliness no longer controls you, the rejection no longer defines you, the past no longer owns you. You are no longer merely surviving this season, you are being transformed by it, and that transformation is preparing you for something you cannot yet see. Because once your heart is whole, once your identity is firmly rooted in God's love, once your peace no longer depends on circumstances, a remarkable shift begins to take place. The isolation that once felt like a prison starts revealing itself as a training ground. You begin to understand that God was not simply protecting you from the wrong people. He was preparing you for the assignment that has been waiting for you all along. And that is where your journey leads next. Chapter 4. Your isolation has been preparing you for your divine assignment. Beloved child of God. Have you ever noticed that the greatest transformations rarely happen when life is crowded? They happen in the quiet. They happen when no one is applauding. They happen when there are no cameras, no recognition, no audience. The world celebrates public victories, but heaven celebrates private obedience. Long before anyone sees the fruit, God is cultivating the roots. And perhaps that is exactly what He has been doing in your life. Maybe you've been asking, God, when will my purpose finally begin? While God has been gently whispering, it already has. You see, many people imagine purpose as a destination, a promotion, a ministry, a successful business, a marriage, a platform, a calling that everyone else can see. But God's definition of purpose is much deeper. Purpose begins long before the public ever notices. It begins the moment you allow Him to shape your character. Because God is never in a hurry to place someone in a position that their heart is not yet prepared to sustain. Imagine building a skyscraper. Everyone admires the height. Very few appreciate the foundation buried beneath the ground. Yet, the taller the building, the deeper the foundation must be. If the foundation is shallow, the building becomes dangerous. Beloved child of God. What if your isolation has been God digging your foundation? It doesn't feel impressive. It doesn't receive applause. Sometimes it even feels like you're moving backward. But foundations are always built below the surface. The deeper God takes you now, the higher He can trust you later. This explains why your progress has felt invisible. You've compared yourself to people who seem to be advancing faster. You've watched others celebrate milestones while you've been quietly waiting. There were moments when you questioned whether God had forgotten your name. But heaven has never confused preparation with delay. The time God spends preparing you is never time wasted, because a blessing received before you're ready can become a burden instead of a gift. Think about an eagle. When an eagle is young, it doesn't immediately soar above the mountains. It spends countless hours strengthening its wings. To someone watching from below, it might appear inactive, but every movement is developing the strength required for future flight. If the eagle attempted to fly too soon, it wouldn't reach greater heights, it would fall. Beloved child of God. Your waiting has been strengthening your wings. Every disappointment has taught you resilience. Every unanswered prayer has deepened your trust. Every lonely night has expanded your dependence upon God. Every tear you've cried in secret has watered the soil of your future. None of it has been meaningless. In fact, some of your greatest qualifications cannot be listed on a resume. You now understand pain in ways you never did before. Because you've experienced loneliness, you'll recognize those who feel forgotten. Because you've endured rejection, you'll know how to encourage the brokenhearted. Because you've wrestled with uncertainty, you'll be able to speak hope into someone else's darkness. Your suffering has been quietly producing compassion. And compassion is one of heaven's greatest qualifications. Many people seek influence. God seeks faithful hearts. Influence without compassion creates pride. Success without humility creates destruction. Authority without love becomes control. That is why God spends so much time shaping the heart before revealing the assignment. Beloved child of God, have you noticed how different your prayers have become? Perhaps you once prayed mostly for comfort. Now you pray for wisdom. Perhaps you once asked God to remove every challenge. Now you ask Him for strength to endure. Perhaps you once wanted quick answers. Now you're learning to trust His timing. That is not accidental. That is maturity. Your spirit is growing. Your perspective is changing. You are becoming less focused on temporary happiness and more focused on eternal purpose. That transformation is priceless. Because the assignment God has prepared for you is not simply about achieving success. It is about becoming someone through whom His love can flow freely. Sometimes we assume our purpose is only found in extraordinary moments, but purpose often begins in ordinary faithfulness. It's choosing kindness when no one notices. It's remaining honest when compromise seems easier. It's forgiving someone who may never apologize. It's continuing to trust God when circumstances make no sense. These quiet acts of obedience are preparing you for responsibilities you cannot yet imagine. One day, people may admire the strength they see in you. They will call you resilient, wise, patient, faith-filled. They may even ask, "How did you become this person?" What they won't see are the countless moments you spent alone with God, the prayers whispered through tears, the battles fought in silence, the nights when all you had was His promise, the mornings when you chose faith over fear, the hidden victories that no audience ever applauded. Those unseen moments became the workshop where heaven shaped your soul. Beloved child of God, you are not falling behind. You are being built differently. God is not preparing you merely to survive life. He is preparing you to become a source of light for others walking through their own darkness. The comfort you receive today will become the comfort you give tomorrow. The wisdom you gain today will become the wisdom someone else desperately needs. Your isolation has never been only about you. It has always been preparing you to carry hope into the lives of those who have almost given up. And when you finally understand that, a profound realization begins to settle into your heart. The season you once begged God to end may become the very season you thank Him for the most, because your isolation accomplished far more than preparing you for an assignment. It reshaped your heart, it strengthened your faith, it revealed your true identity. But above all, it quietly led you into something far greater than purpose, because purpose without God's presence will always leave the soul searching for more. God never intended your greatest discovery to be a platform, a relationship, a calling, or even a breakthrough. His greatest desire was that in the silence where every other voice faded away, you would discover Him, the God who never left, the God who heard every silent prayer, the God who walked beside you when you believed you were walking alone. Because sometimes the greatest blessing God gives us is not a changed circumstance. It is a deeper relationship with Him. And once you discover that, you realize the greatest gift of isolation was never what you lost. It was who you found. Which leads us to the next chapter 5. The greatest gift of isolation is not what you lost, but who you found. Beloved child of God, if someone had asked you before this season what your greatest blessing would be, you might have named a restored relationship, a successful career, a happy marriage, financial freedom, a larger circle of friends, a life without disappointment. Those are natural desires. There is nothing wrong with longing for companionship, stability, or success. But what if God had something even greater in mind? What if the greatest miracle of this season was never meant to happen around you, but within you? Because there comes a moment in every believer's journey when God gently removes every lesser source of security so that He can reveal Himself as the greatest source of all. Not because he wants to deprive you, but because he loves you too deeply to let your soul depend on anything that can disappear. People change, circumstances change, seasons change, opportunities come and go. But God remains the same. Beloved child of God. That truth sounds simple, until life is quiet enough for it to become real. There were days when you reached for your phone, hoping someone would check on you. Days when you wished someone would notice your silence. Days when you longed for a conversation that never happened. And while those moments hurt, something extraordinary was taking place beneath the surface. Little by little, your first instinct began to change. Instead of immediately looking outward, you began looking upward. Instead of searching for constant reassurance from people, you found yourself sitting quietly in God's presence. At first, it felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable. Silence has a way of exposing how busy our hearts have been. We often fill every empty space with noise because we fear what we might discover if we slow down. But God is never afraid of silence. In fact, He often speaks most clearly when everything else becomes quiet. Perhaps you've experienced this yourself. A verse of Scripture suddenly carries a meaning you've never noticed before. A prayer feels less like repeating words and more like opening your heart to a loving Father. A sunrise reminds you that God's faithfulness has arrived again, even after one of your darkest nights. You begin noticing His fingerprints in ordinary moments, the peace that arrives without explanation, the unexpected strength to face another day, the quiet assurance that somehow everything will be okay, not because every problem has disappeared, but because His presence has become more real than your fear. Beloved child of God. This is the hidden treasure of isolation. It strips away the illusion that God is distant. When distractions fade, His nearness becomes unmistakable. You realize He was never absent during your lonely nights. He was sitting beside you. He never stopped listening to your silent tears. He never overlooked the prayers you could barely put into words. Every sigh, every disappointment, every moment you whispered, "Lord, I don't understand." He heard them all, and He stayed. There is something profoundly healing about discovering a love that does not fluctuate with circumstances. Human love, as beautiful as it can be, is imperfect. People forget. People become busy. People misunderstand. Sometimes they leave. But God's love remains constant, not because you've earned it, but because it flows from His unchanging nature. This realization begins to reshape your entire outlook on life. You stop seeing yourself as someone who has been abandoned. You begin seeing yourself as someone who has been accompanied all along. The loneliness that once echoed through your heart slowly gives way to holy confidence, not confidence in yourself alone, but confidence in the one who promised never to leave you. Beloved child of God. Notice how your prayers have changed. You no longer pray only for God to remove every difficult circumstance. You begin praying, "Lord, reveal yourself to me in the middle of this season. Teach me what you want me to learn. Help me become the person you created me to be." Those prayers are different. They are the prayers of a heart that is no longer chasing temporary relief. They are the prayers of someone who desires lasting transformation, and God delights in answering those prayers, because His greatest goal has never been merely to improve your circumstances. His greatest goal has always been to draw you closer to Himself. That closeness changes everything. It changes how you respond to rejection. It changes how you handle waiting. It changes how you view success. It changes how you love other people. You no longer expect others to fill spaces that only God was designed to occupy. Instead, you begin loving people from a place of fullness rather than desperation. That is freedom. You no longer cling to relationships out of fear. You no longer settle for less than God's best because you're afraid of being alone. You no longer sacrifice your peace just to avoid temporary loneliness, because you have discovered something the world cannot offer. You have discovered that intimacy with God is richer than popularity. His approval is stronger than applause. His peace is deeper than constant companionship. And once your heart discovers that treasure, No season is ever truly empty again. Beloved child of God. One day, the friendships God has prepared will come, the opportunities He has ordained will arrive, the doors He intends to open will open. The people meant to walk beside you will recognize the person you've become, but they will meet a different version of you. Not someone desperate to be chosen, but someone who already knows they are chosen by God. Not someone searching for identity, but someone securely rooted in it. Not someone afraid of being alone, but someone who has learned that even in solitude, they were never alone. And that is why your future will look different from your past. Because God has not only been changing your circumstances, He has been transforming you. Yet there is one final revelation that ties everything together. A truth so powerful that once you embrace it, you'll never see this season the same way again. You'll understand why heaven allowed the silence, why the friendships ended, why the waiting continued, why the reset became necessary. Because what looked like isolation was actually an invitation into the next chapter of your destiny. And that final revelation awaits you in the next chapter. Chapter 6. The reset wasn't the end of your story. It was heaven rewriting it. Beloved child of God. If someone had shown you this season years ago, you probably would have tried to avoid it. You would have prayed for God to remove the loneliness, to restore every friendship, to reopen every closed door, to return life to the way it used to be. Because from where you stood, the reset looked like loss. But from where God stands, the reset looks like redemption. There is a profound difference. We often ask God to restore what was, while He is preparing what will be. And the two are not always the same. Sometimes we become so attached to yesterday that we cannot recognize the miracle waiting in tomorrow. We ask God to resurrect a chapter that He has already finished writing. But beloved child of God, God is not the author of unfinished stories. He knows every chapter before it unfolds. He knows every tear before it falls. He knows every prayer before it leaves your lips. Nothing about your life has caught Him by surprise, not the heartbreak, not the betrayal, not the loneliness, not the silence, not even the moments when you questioned His presence. While you were trying to understand your circumstances, God was orchestrating your future. Think about a master artist restoring an ancient masterpiece. Before new colors can be applied, old layers must sometimes be removed, dust must be cleaned away, cracks must be repaired. The process can appear destructive. Someone unfamiliar with restoration might panic. You're ruining the painting, but the artist knows something they don't. He's revealing the masterpiece hidden beneath the damage. Beloved child of God, you are not being erased, you are being restored. The version of yourself that depended on approval is giving way to the version that walks in confidence. The version that feared rejection is becoming someone anchored in God's acceptance. The version that constantly searched for validation is becoming someone who finds security in God's promises. That transformation is priceless. Because God is not merely changing your surroundings, He is renewing your mind, He is healing your heart, He is strengthening your spirit. And when the inside changes, the outside eventually follows. Perhaps you've noticed it already. The things that once upset you no longer hold the same power. The opinions that once controlled you no longer define you. The silence that once frightened you now brings peace. This is evidence that God has been working even when you couldn't see it. Transformation often happens gradually, much like the sunrise. No single moment announces the arrival of daylight, yet before long, darkness has quietly disappeared. In the same way, your healing has been unfolding one faithful day at a time, one surrendered prayer at a time, one quiet act of trust at a time. And although you may not feel completely different, you are not the same person you were when this season began. Beloved child of God, take a moment to remember where you started. Remember the fear, the confusion, the endless questions, the feeling that your life had stopped moving. Now look at what God has quietly accomplished. He has taught you patience. He has strengthened your faith. He has shown you that His presence is enough. He has given you peace that no circumstance can manufacture. That is not failure. That is transformation. Now, imagine carrying this new heart into the next season. Imagine entering new relationships without fear of abandonment. Imagine pursuing opportunities without needing everyone's approval. Imagine loving others without losing yourself. Imagine serving God with confidence instead of insecurity. This is why your isolation mattered. Because God wasn't preparing an event, He was preparing you. And when God prepares the person, the purpose eventually follows. Yet there remains one final truth that heaven wants you to carry long after this video ends. A truth that can forever change the way you see every difficult season of your life. One day, you will thank God for the season you once begged Him to end. Beloved child of God, one day, perhaps sooner than you think, you will look back on this season with different eyes. The tears you cried will become testimonies. The prayers you whispered in loneliness will become reminders of God's faithfulness. The nights that felt endless will become evidence that He carried you through every one of them. You won't remember this season as the time you were forgotten. You'll remember it as the place where you finally found yourself in God. There is a beautiful mystery about divine timing. We rarely understand it while we are living through it. Only afterward do we begin connecting the pieces. You'll realize that if certain people had stayed, you might never have grown. If certain doors had remained open, you might never have discovered the better path. If life had remained comfortable, you might never have depended so deeply on God. What once looked like delay will reveal itself as protection. What once felt like rejection will reveal itself as redirection. What once appeared to be isolation will reveal itself as holy preparation. Beloved child of God, your story is not defined by who walked away. It is defined by the God who walked with you. Your future is not determined by what you lost. It is determined by what God is building. Your value has never been measured by the size of your circle. It has always been measured by the immeasurable love your Heavenly Father has for you. So stop calling yourself forgotten. Heaven knows your name. Stop calling yourself behind. God's timing has never been late. Stop believing that your best days belong to your past. The author of your life is still writing new chapters. Some of the most beautiful pages have not even been turned yet. Perhaps the very people who overlooked you will one day witness the peace they never understood. Not so you can prove them wrong, but so they can see what God's grace can accomplish in a surrendered heart. Beloved child of God, the greatest miracle was never that your circumstances changed. The greatest miracle is that you changed. You learned to stand when no one applauded. You learned to hope when nothing made sense. You learned to trust when heaven seemed silent. You learned to worship before the breakthrough arrived. That kind of faith cannot be purchased. It cannot be borrowed. It can only be formed through seasons like this. So if you are still walking through your season of isolation today, don't lose heart. Don't rush the process. Don't assume God has forgotten you. He is closer than you realize, working in ways you cannot yet see, opening doors you cannot yet imagine, preparing relationships you have not yet met, healing wounds you cannot yet fully understand, and shaping a future far greater than the one you would have created on your own. One day, the silence will make sense. The waiting will make sense. The separation will make sense. The reset will make sense. And when that day comes, you won't simply thank God for bringing you out of isolation. You'll thank Him for what isolation produced within you. Because your isolation was never a punishment. It was an invitation to know God more deeply, an invitation to become emotionally whole, an invitation to discover your true identity, an invitation to prepare for the purpose heaven designed before you were born. So walk forward with courage, walk forward with faith, walk forward knowing that every step, every tear, every prayer, and every moment of waiting has been seen by the God who never leaves His children. Your story is not ending here. It is only now beginning. If this message spoke to your heart, take a moment to write in the comments, "God was preparing me, not punishing me." And if you know someone who is walking through a lonely season, share this message with them. It may be the reminder they have been praying for. Until next time, may the peace of God guard your heart, strengthen your spirit, and remind you every day that you are deeply loved, divinely chosen, and never, ever alone.